Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for restarting this process of after the NBA season's over, looking at off-season previews for each and every NBA team. And this year, we're starting with the Houston Rockets for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, the NBA draft is upon us nearly. Houston Rockets fans have a lot of interest in that. Of course, this year with Victor Wembanyama in the draft, pretty much everybody does. But then also head coaching change. There's a lot on this team's plate right now, and there's a lot to talk about with the Houston Rockets. So I thought this is a great team to start with. If you want to see another team, go ahead, comment that down in the comment section. I do read every single comment. And if you just have some thoughts as well during the video, things that you want to get off your chest, things you want to say about the Houston Rockets and what you expect from them this offseason, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section as well. Without further ado, let's jump into that video preview. What is this video going to look like? Well, first of all, we're going to recap this past season. I think anytime you start a preview of something, it's important to understand where you're coming from, where this team is at currently, what's on this roster, and kind of what we already have to build around. That's the most important step, and that's phase one for pretty much any GM, any executive. If they were to step into a role, evaluate what you have, see what you need, and you go from there. And then I think a great starting point as well is that head coaching change. You look at, well, now we have a vacancy there after not picking up that fourth-year option on Steven Silas, which I think was a good decision. We'll talk about that head coaching change and some potential candidates that I really like for this Rockets team. I think that they need some maturity in the building for sure. 2023 NBA Draft Lottery odds. We'll take a look at the specific lotto odds for the Rockets. Of course, I'm recording this before the NBA Draft Lottery. That's going to be probably the most important part of this video. And then we'll look at NBA draft prospects that fit at both of their first round selections. NBA free agency, their situation when it comes to cap space, potential players that fit. Of course, there's going to be one guy that everybody in H-Town knows pretty well as a potential rumor signing there in Houston this offseason. And then we'll look at an early outlook for next season. Obviously, pretty early on to be doing that, but that's really what the important part is. You know, the offseason's always fun. It's great to be the quote-unquote offseason winner. You know, you want to win the draft, you want to win free agency, but really when it comes down to is how many games do you win after you make some of these moves. And we'll talk about what I expect from Houston next year, depending on what happens this offseason. So here we are. Let's jump into that season recap and kind of talk about what we saw from them this past year. The team ranked 29th in defensive rating. Again, a very bad season for them defensively, which is what you'd expect from a very young team, a team that is turnover prone, bad shot prone. They're not going to get a lot of stops. They give up a lot of transition baskets. You know, they're young, athletic, fun. They're not good, solid, rotationally, and reliable. Those are, you know, very different things in the NBA. Most young teams do not win a ton. And actually, if you look at this year's rookie class, I believe only 4 players actually had a positive plus minus this year. So young players just generally don't win in the NBA. It's not a knock on them. But the Rockets, when you have as many of them as they do, it's going to be very difficult to win. And you see that in the 22-60 record, which was 14th in the Western Conference this year. Let's touch on Jalen Green quick. I know a lot of people are selling the stock on him a little bit. He averaged 22 points a game this year and shot above 40% from the field. Now, did he have a great season? No. Is that 22 points per game a little empty? I think a little bit. Is he a little bit of a shot chucker at this point? Yes, a little bit. But I think if you get the right coach in there, and this talent, you know, on this team is not very good. They don't have a true point guard. They don't have, you know, a coach at this point where you would trust them to run good offensive sets and to really focus on the development of these young guys. So don't sell your Jalen Green stock. I think that's my biggest point. Alperen Şengün, I really do believe in him. I know that there is basically an Alperen Şengün cult, which I'm all aboard that as well. You know, I think Şengün is a very skilled big man. Now, I think you're going to have to be creative with him defensively. He's a smarter defender than what people are currently giving him credit. Obviously, you know, he's going to get labeled certain ways because of how he looks, and you know, he's not the fast-footed big man who can, you know, block a lot of shots at the rim, but I think he understands defensive rotations, which is already the first challenge when it comes to progressing young players defensively. Tari Eason, who I really liked as a draft pick for them last year, I think that there's a lot to work with there. He averaged a little bit over 9 points a game this season. He's kind of a rebounding machine as a wing. And I think the potential with him is very high. He's going to be somebody who I think is very benefited by structure, development plans, and just overall better structure in the organization. So this offseason, I think, is an important one for Tari Eason in terms of finding that stability that that organization needs. KJ Martin, probably the best in-game dunker in the NBA. He's been so fun to watch the last few years. He averaged around 14 points a game this season. Those top four guys are four of the players on this roster that I really trust could be on this team for a while yet at this point. I know some people are going to notice the absence of Kevin Porter Jr. there. It's not that KPJ is a bad player. I just think that Houston's maybe looking to turn the corner on what they've been and turn into something new, what they want to become. Is it possible KPJ sticks around in like a bench scoring role? Yes, and I think that's really the role that he's meant to be in. I've been saying that for about 2.5 years now. But, you know, I think it could be in a different city. I think it could be in Houston. Either way, I hope Kevin Porter Jr. finds success, even if it's not with the Houston Rockets. And I think the Rockets might find success if KPJ is not a part of their team. It's not that he's the problem or anything. There's a lot of flaws on this team right now. I think that he's just not contributing to winning either. And I think they need to find a different style backcourt partner with Jalen Green. And then let's talk about Jabari Smith Jr. Obviously, there's been a lot of slander on Jabari's name this year. I know he did not play as well as everyone was hoping to. Now with the season concluded, we have a good idea of what he, did his rookie season. We've seen the numbers. We watch him play. And the expectation was he's going to come into the league and shoot very, very well right away. And he just didn't. But I think that can be attributed to a few things. First of all, the stability and structure in Houston, like I said, is not very good. I don't think he was given a lot of clean looks. He doesn't really have a backcourt that's going to create open looks for him, and isn't the best passing backcourt in the league. I don't think there's a surprise in me saying that with KPJ and Jalen Green. Dyson Nix was playing point guard a good amount of this season. I just don't really think it's fair to judge Jabari Smith Jr. Based on his rookie year, but he is the first ever rookie to record 1,000 points, 500 plus rebounds, 50 plus blocks, and 100 plus threes in a season, which is a good indication as to why, everyone, including me, looked at him as a top 3, top 4 player in last year's draft. I still think there's a lot to work with there. Now, is he going to become a star player? Probably not. That's, something I was a little critical of last year. I just didn't look at him as a star, but I think he's going to be a very high-end player, and somebody who can still help you win a lot of games, especially when there's more talent around him. Then we go into some of that coaching change discussion. Remember, the Rockets did not pick up that 4th-year option on Steven Silas' contract, basically ending their relationship as coach and organization. So now they're looking at new candidates, and here are some of the listed ones that have been reported upon. Frank Vogel, former head coach of the Indiana Pacers and Los Angeles Lakers. Ime Udoka, longtime assistant. And then, of course, former Boston Celtics head coach, coached in the NBA Finals just a year ago. Nick Nurse, current coach of the Toronto Raptors. There's some rumors that he could be out there in Toronto. Kenny Atkinson has coached in a variety of places as an assistant specifically, but also was the head coach in Brooklyn for quite a few years and found quite a bit of success with a very young team there, which I think makes him an interesting candidate for this job. James Borrego, who found, I think, way more success in Charlotte than what most people had expected. Adrian Griffin is actually the father of AJ Griffin, the rookie wing who plays for the Atlanta Hawks as we currently speak. Adrian Griffin, former NBA player. He's been an assistant coach in the league for a long time. He's a very qualified candidate. I would say, you look at Darvin Ham, how qualified he was last year in coaching consideration, obviously getting that Lakers job. I would say Adrian Griffin, very similar in terms of the pedigree that he has to become a coach. Sam Cassell basically could become a head coach in a lot of different areas. He's been so loyal to Doc Rivers as an assistant. We'll see what happens there. And then Mike D'Antoni, interesting name that's been reported by The Athletic as a potential option for Houston. Of course, coached the franchise for quite a while back with Harden as the point guard of the organization. For me, I think Frank Vogel's a very strong candidate. I know a lot of Rockets fans on the video that my co-creator recorded talking about Silas out, Vogel as a potential option. A lot of them didn't like him, and I think they reference mostly looking back at his Lakers days. You have to remember he won a championship with the Los Angeles Lakers. While he was the Lakers coach, they were consistently top 2, top 3 in defense pretty much every single year. And then I want to rewind back to his Indiana days. When he was coaching the Pacers, he made Roy Hibbert an all-star level center. He was the coach while Paul George blossomed into a superstar. He found a lot of success using George Hill as his kind of point guard that would run the offense, set everything up. You know, he's found success with guys like Lance Stevenson. I mean, he's been a very good coach in the NBA. I think he would be a great candidate. In fact, out of everyone on this list, so I really love Nick Nurse as a coach. I think Nick Nurse is a great coach. He would be awesome. But Frank Vogel, to me, is probably the most clear-cut best candidate for this position. Now, does that mean he gets the job? No. Does that mean that if I sat down with him in an interview that I would for sure hire him? Not necessarily, but just looking at it on paper, he would be my preference going into the interview process. Of course, that doesn't mean anything really, but it does, you know, show that I think he's a very good candidate for this job just based on his track record. Now, as we go forward into some of those lottery odds, we see that the Houston Rockets have a 14% chance at picking first overall in the draft, which is the most important pick this year, obviously, with Victor Wembanyama. Every year you want to be picking first, but especially in a draft where this is probably the best prospect we've ever seen walk on the face of the planet Earth. Maybe it won't be the best player, but best prospect. 14% chance at landing him. You love those odds because it's tied for best. 13.4% chance at picking second, 12.7% chance at third, 12% chance at fourth, and then a 14.8% chance to be picking fifth overall, plus a 26% chance to be picking sixth and a 7% chance to be picking seventh overall. So as of right now, the Rockets can range anywhere from 1 to 7. I have a draft lottery explained video up on the channel, which really goes into depth how the draft lottery actually works and the process behind it, and why the odds are the way that they are. So I would recommend going and checking that video out after this one if you're more curious about that. That video just came out the day before this one. So now when we look at the draft picks that Houston actually owns, they have their own 2023 first. We just talked about the lottery odds there with that one. They also own that Clippers 2023 first from what was a genius trade by Raphael Stone, swapping Eric Gordon over to the Los Angeles Clippers, and then therefore moving up their Milwaukee Bucks first round pick this year to their Clippers first, which is going to result in about 11 spots differential, which is a very, very good move by them. And then we look at their own 2023 second round pick, which is top 32 protected. We still have to understand what's going to happen with the coin flip there between Houston and San Antonio for if that pick fully conveys or not. But as of right now, I believe that Houston will have that pick to make their selection. So let's look at some potential draft selections for them. With their own first, it really depends on where that lottery selection lands. The lottery is in the middle of May. And as of right now, this is pure speculation about where they could be. Obviously, if you're watching this video after the draft lottery, you're going to have a really good idea of who they might take, which is why I included the number overall pick that they'd have to get one of these guys. Victor Wembanyama, if you're drafting him, you have to have the first overall pick, which is a real possibility. Again, 14% chance for Houston, tied for the best odds in the NBA to land Victor Wembanyama, who is, again, a generational, franchise-changing, life-altering type prospect. Scoot Henderson, second overall, most years would be a first overall pick worthy player if Victor Wembanyama did not exist, as Victor himself stated previously. Scoot's a very good prospect, and with what Houston really needs, you know, how many times have I already talked about organization, the need for a point guard next to Jalen Green, Jabari Smith? You know, it's already been a main topic of discussion in this video. Scoot Henderson would greatly help this team. He's a very smart, intuitive player who's also very capable of putting the ball in the deck, getting his own shot off, and by the way, he's very good at it. So those are things that Scoot Henderson could provide to them as well if they're picking second. Then third or fourth overall is where the draft really opens up a little bit. Amen Thompson out of Overtime Elite could be a really great option for them because of his ability to pass the ball. He's 6'7" guard, very athletic, very quick. He's got a very tight handle. He has basically the ball on the string. And he's impressive to watch, especially with his quickness, his burst, and just his ability to make reads quickly. But there are questions about, the level of talent he's faced playing against lesser competition in comparison to a guy like Brandon Miller, who spent his freshman season, albeit a little bit older than most freshmen usually. He's already 20 years old. But again, he spent it in the SEC playing against very, very good collegiate players and found a lot of success for Alabama this past season. Being their kind of go-to scorer in a very pro-style offense that Nate Oates runs there at Alabama. The Crimson Tide very, three-point oriented and also shots at the rim oriented, which is what a lot of teams are looking for with analytical basketball. I mean, Houston, you guys know all about it. You were basically the originators of this movement a little bit in the NBA. And Brandon Miller, Amen Thompson, one of those two guys is going to go third overall. It really depends on which team is where, but I think Houston could consider either of them depending on what they feel like they have chances at in free agency. Jarris Walker, if the Rockets fell to 5th or later, I'm sure Rockets fans, you guys know Jarris Walker very well because he obviously plays for Houston, the University of Houston. So he's someone you guys are well aware of, I'm sure, at this point. Ausar Thompson, also a guy who they would consider 5th or later. Athletic wing, twin brother of Amen Thompson, more of an athletic finisher instead of an athletic playmaker, but he has elements to that. He's also a better shooter than his twin brother Amen, so maybe there's a little bit more of a clear role for him off the ball, whereas Amen Thompson's going to be a little bit more ball dominant in the NBA. There's benefits and pros to both of them. And then Anthony Black, a guy who I really like. Most people you won't see considering him as a top 5, top 6 type pick. I myself am, because I think he's someone who, again, with being able to help organize the Rockets, he's a very good defender. I think he's got all the physicals, all the tools that you want to see in a player if you're drafting him in the top 10 as a guy to, progress and improve his talents. I think he's somebody who offensively could project very similarly to Josh Giddey, who we've seen find a lot of success with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I think maybe defensively he's a little bit more capable, a little bit more competent on that end, which would help Houston with one of their biggest flaws, which again is that defensive prowess that they just don't have because, one, they're young, and second, they weren't organized, and defensively they just didn't really have any true system that they were trying to employ, which is why they gave up so many points per game. It was basically a shootout every single night, and typically Houston lost that because they were less talented and younger and still learning the ways in the NBA. But I think Anthony Black would help them too. I think these are some very good options for them, 7 of them to be exact, that Houston could strongly consider with their pick. Obviously, Rockets fans, you're going to be hoping for that 1st overall pick. But with the way this team's constructed, 2nd overall wouldn't be bad. Even 3rd or 4th, you can still get a very, very good player that would help them day one of that guy's career. Which leads us then into our next pick, which is pick number 19. And there's some guys out here still that I like. Derek Lively II, he's a center out of Duke, pictured far right on the graphic. Very athletic, very big, rim protecting, kind of triple R, rim protection, rim running, rolling. Those are the things that he'll bring to the table. Pretty much every single team in the NBA needs a guy who can roll in the pick and roll, who can catch lobs, finish around the rim. He's got a huge catch radius. He's also somebody who he blocks a lot of shots. He's had multiple 6-7 block games in his college career, including a big 8-block game against Kentucky earlier in his freshman campaign. So Derek Lively is a guy that I think would be a great option for them. We talked about Alperen Sengun not being the most athletic, most fleet-footed, rim-protecting type center. Derek Lively could maybe make up for some of those sins. Chris Murray, twin brother of Keegan Murray, who found a lot of success his rookie season for Sacramento. I think Chris Murray is going to be a solid player. He's going to be very reliant on the 3-ball. Probably 65 to 75% of his baskets as a rookie will be from behind the arc. He's more of a role-playing type player, but at pick 19, if you can find a guy who sticks in the NBA, can space the floor, and is solid defensively, it's a huge step in the right direction for a team that needs that. Dariq Whitehead's got higher upside than a lot of these other guys. I think Lively out of these 4 has the highest upside, but Dariq Whitehead, someone who was former National Player of the Year at the high school level. Going into Duke as a freshman, a lot of people expected him to be a top 5 pick. Just didn't have the year that most people were hoping to see out of him, but he could still help this team a lot as a wing shooter. He's about 6'6". Kind of reminds me of AJ Griffin, who we referenced earlier, playing for Atlanta. He had a very nice rookie season, AJ Griffin did. And Dariq Whitehead could maybe surprise some people as well his rookie year. Then Noah Clowney, playing for Alabama. We talked about Alabama's very pro-style offense. Very similar effects on Noah Clowney, who can already step out behind the three-point line, knock it down as a big man. This gives Houston another big man option. I think that they just need a little bit more help on the boards. Another guy behind Alperen Şengün that can give them quality center minutes. But again, this is pick 19. This isn't going to be someone who probably develops into a long-term starter. But I could see any or all of these guys being good fits for them at pick 19. Which then leads us towards NBA free agency, which is a very, very important step for the Houston Rockets this year because they're estimated with nearly $75 million in practical cap space this offseason. Typically, when I've made these videos, most teams, the teams with a lot of cap space, a lot of money, sit around $30 to $35 million in cap space. Well, the Rockets are loaded this year with available cap room. And part of that is John Wall's massive money number is coming off the books, as well as some other dead cap numbers that Houston has shed in the past couple of years. They also, in addition to that $75 million, have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception available to use, which could be anywhere from about $11 to $12 million a year this year. So you could look at, maybe 2 max players, another guy around that $3 to $7 million mark, and then another $11 million player, which really opens up the door for a lot of potential signings. GM Rafael Stone has made it very clear as well. The team wants to add good veterans to push toward winning, and you have to understand why. They owe their 2024 first to Oklahoma City from the Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul swap from years ago. So they have some incentive to win. And free agency is going to be a good way for them to add some talent. I know there's also a lot of buzz around Jaylen Brown. As of right now, my expectation is that Jaylen Brown is not playing for the Houston Rockets within the next year and a half. That's going to be, pretty clear, cut and dry, my opinion on that. I don't really see that changing. Now, is it possible Houston could try to act slowly in free agency this year to see if they could maybe take a swing at Jaylen Brown next offseason when he's actually an unrestricted free agent? Yes, I think that would be a potential avenue for them. But is it one that I would say is a great plan? Because, it's possible that at some point Brown could make all NBA and then get a supermax deal from Boston. That's a real possibility. So I think Houston should act swiftly this offseason. I understand the desire to wait for Jaylen Brown, make him the star player on your team, but I just really do not believe that they have the ability to really get that done with what I expect to happen with Jaylen Brown's contract situation in Boston, which leads me to what their priority number 1 should be, and it's re-signing James Harden back to the organization. There were rumors that came out Christmas Day from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN discussing how James Harden would potentially consider a reunion back to Houston, and everything that has needed to happen to open that avenue up is underway. Steven Silas going out the door is step number 1. The team having some young talent is step number 2, and having cap space to bring in other veterans is step number 3. They have all of those 3 steps. Now you just need James Harden to actually buy in. And step number 4, the most important step, is Philadelphia flaming out in the playoffs before the Eastern Conference Finals. A second round exit in Philadelphia would make it more likely for James Harden to leave based on my understanding of the situation. As of right now, this is not, I've not had discussions with James Harden. I'm going to be very clear about that. But I do think that, the expectation if he were to stay in Philly is that he hopes to win a championship. But if the writing's on the wall that maybe that's not going to happen, we could see a massive turn of events in Philly that could lead to James Harden potentially leaving, maybe Joel Embiid even requesting a trade. I don't really want to go down that pathway. I don't think that's worth my time in this video. But I do think James Harden leaving Philadelphia is a real possibility that is dependent on the postseason performance of the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason. And if you're a Rockets fan and you're looking for something to cheer for, it would be Boston in round 2, to be honest. You should be cheering against the Philadelphia 76ers so that it's more and more likely that James Harden would return to the organization. I know this is going to be a split decision by Rockets fans. I'm sure that people have already typed in the comment section, we don't want Harden back, this, that, and the other thing. Trust me, yes, you do. The best player you've had since Hakeem Olajuwon. And I'm telling you right now, this number 13 in H-Town, James Harden, franchise-changing type of player. You guys saw it the first time when he got there. A guy who's never missed the postseason, has advanced to the conference finals 4 times in his career, has had postseasons where he puts up 28, 29 points per game in a playoff run. Puts up, for his career since leaving Oklahoma City, almost 27 points per game in the postseason, including 7 assists a night, and he does it decently in terms of efficiency wise. He's been a very, very good playoff performer. I know he's had moments that he's kind of fallen apart, turnover prone in big moments. He's had games where he just doesn't, assert himself as much as you would think he should. But he still has gotten the Houston Rockets way further in the playoffs than a guy like Tracy McGrady ever did. And some other key players that Houston's had for a long time, Yao Ming. James Harden's been that guy, the second best player in franchise history, and there's an argument that he's probably the most skilled perimeter player this team has ever had as well. He should be the priority number 1. I know Rockets fans aren't going to all agree with this, but it's pretty clear after trading James Harden, the team went from consistently making deep playoff runs to being the worst team in the NBA in terms of win-loss category over the last 3 years. The Rockets need James Harden more than he needs them. But luckily for Houston, he likes Houston and he likes being there. He likes the nightlife specifically. And I think that Houston is home for him, which I think is a very good thing for them when it comes to free agency negotiations, because then from there, using the rest of that cap space that they have, there's a vast amount of other free agents that could significantly help this team. So let's dive into them. Using cap space, a guy like Draymond Green, and I know Rockets fans are maybe grimacing right now. He's an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, Golden State has bird rights on him. He's also on a player option, which I think he could potentially decline. Not exactly certain on that because I don't know what's going to happen this offseason with Draymond Green. But if you're looking to add a defensive presence, this is exactly the guy you want to add. He's probably the smartest defender in the NBA. He's one of the more versatile defenders in the NBA. He is a possession saver in terms of cleaning the glass defensively and also just making heroic plays sometimes that you just can't expect somebody to make, and he goes out and makes that play. He's been such a good defender in his career. Now, I know, is this a risk because he's a little bit later into his career? Yes, but if the idea is, look, we have all this young talent, we need somebody who can step in and help us win now. Draymond Green's a guy who can definitely do that, especially alongside an offensive talent like James Harden. Harrison Barnes, he'll be a little bit more expensive than that mid-level exception that we talked about earlier. Again, probably somewhere in that $17 to $22 million a year mark. Maybe you can get him on a 3-year, $65 million deal. And if so, I think that's well worth it because he's a very reliable forward. He's had a nice season for Sacramento. Is it likely he sticks in Sacramento? Yes, I think that's ultimately where Barnes lands. But again, this is the type of veteran that we're talking about that Houston would look to acquire. Dillon Brooks, if we're looking, again, for more defensive upside guys who can help this team defense out a lot, Dillon Brooks, his physicality, I think, would set a precedent for this team. And for if you're looking to put players around James Harden specifically, Dillon Brooks would be the guy that I think would be a great fit. Bruce Brown, another option. You could get him on the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. You might not even have to use all of it to land him. He would be a very good option, and he does not have bird rights there in Denver because it was a shorter term deal with a player option in there. So Bruce Brown likely headed toward free agency again this offseason. I think he would be a very nice addition. Jay Crowder, unrestricted free agent after Milwaukee traded for him. I think the Bucks will have a very deep playoff run. Potentially we could be saying Jay Crowder, NBA champion Jay Crowder after this season. I think that, the Bucks are going to go very far. I think that there's a good chance they win it all. But Jay Crowder is going to have a nice impact in that series. I think he would be another good example of a guy on the non-taxpayer mid-level exception that would really help that team out. And then Kevin Love, you look at his role in Cleveland's rebuild. There were some ups and downs there. I think Kevin Love keeps it very real, which I think is actually a good thing to have in the locker room, because Kevin Love's the type of guy who's not afraid to call others out and hold people accountable. We saw that in Cleveland, intentionally getting 3-second calls when he was getting looked off in post-up opportunities. That seems a little petty, but the message comes through clear. And I think if you look at Cleveland now with where they're at, it's clear that the team has improved, that the team has picked up some of the messages that Kevin Love was sending to them. Even if it wasn't maybe in the most, appropriate way, the best way, it's still learning moments for some of those young guys. So I think Houston, if you're looking to help develop some of those young guys, you find some of these role type players, whether it's defensively or offensively, a guy like Kevin Love, who I think can be a vocal leader for them. These are all really great options for them in free agency. And if you're able to string together a few of them, for example, Draymond Green, and then maybe you use your non-taxpayer mid-level on a guy like Jay Crowder, you've really added in some good forward depth while also signing a guy like James Harden in free agency. You're at a really good spot, which leads me to the dream scenario. The dream scenario would be landing the first overall pick, drafting Victor Wembanyama first overall, making him your kind of build around franchise player. You then sign James Harden to put Victor Wembanyama in competitive games on day one of his NBA career and show to him, look, we don't want to just develop you and we just don't want to have fun with you being a star player here. We want to win. And Wembanyama, Harden, Jalen Green, and then, players X, Y, and Z from free agency could definitely help set this team up to win games right away. I'm talking about like maybe a playoff run in their first season. Now, is that a little ambitious? Potentially, but I'm telling you guys, Victor Wembanyama is going to average 20 to 25 points a game as a rookie. He's going to be that good. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to get the touches because the team's going to force feed him as they should. And James Harden's one of the best playmakers, if not the best playmaker in the NBA for others. I really don't see any flaw in this. This would give Victor Wembanyama the runway to winning games early on. Obviously, Houston's going to give him time to shine, let him be the star player. But also, James Harden could help set him up and put him in, situations where he's rolling downhill off of a short roll. And, oh, by the way, now he's coming downhill and he's just about to dunk on a guy. And there's really no way you can stop that shell coverage because James Harden's going to make the right play if that little dump off to Wembanyama is not there. So I think that's why it's a dream scenario. I know, again, people are probably going to be like, oh, really? Do we really want to re-sign James Harden? You already got the draft picks for trading him. Why would you not want him back? It just seems like a win-win, especially when you owe your pick to OKC this next year. You want to be competitive. Harden, Wembanyama, plus the young core sets you up in a very, very good manner going forward. And then next season, I think it massively relies on lottery luck and the free agency outcomes. I would love to say that I know Houston's going to be a playoff team next year. I don't know that, though, because it depends on where they're drafting and who actually signs with them, which is why this offseason and this offseason preview I thought was the one that we needed to start with, because it's probably one that has the most on the line in terms of how early it could affect the results of postseason basketball in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama plus James Harden plus a good coach, you're probably making a playoff run. And if you get some of those other right depth pieces like a Jay Crowder, a Draymond Green, a Dylan Brooks, some of those guys in there, not all of them, but some of them, you're a good team because you have the young talent, you have the athleticism. I can see KJ Martin catching lob dunks from James Harden and just flushing it home on a guy. I can see them being a very good team next year if they have Harden, who's going to be the organizer, and Victor, who would be the finisher. If you land Victor and you hire a good coach, but you don't get Harden, you might not be a team that makes a playoff run, but you might be a team that's competitive. Kind of where we see Oklahoma City this year, where they might not make the playoffs. I'm recording this before the play-in tournament, but making the play-in tournament is exactly the type of competitive that you want to be when you're a young team. You want to have some meaningful games. A win-or-go-home type atmosphere is very, very good for young players in terms of raising the stakes and saying, look, our season's on the line. Let's go out there and perform. Let's execute what we're working on. I always think those high-leverage games are awesome for young players. But also there's the real possibility of, hey, maybe the Rockets fall to 5 in the draft. Maybe they strike out in free agency. Maybe they don't even hire the right coach. You never really know, right? I think that could lead to being a long season next year. I think that Houston has a wide variety of ways that this next season could go. They could be a very good team that wins 45-ish games, 45 to 50-ish games. Now, 50 is a really hard number to hit in the Western Conference with how deep it is. But if everything goes right, though, they might have the talent to get that done. I'm not, optimistic that that's going to be the case, but maybe. If they get lucky in some regards, they might win 35 to 40 games. If everything goes wrong, we could see them win 25 games again this year. And, Rockets fans, I don't want to speak that into existence, but it's just the reality. So I'm pulling for Houston. As you can tell from my James Harden jersey there, I was pulling for him in Houston pretty much his entire time there. I loved Harden back in Oklahoma City. I thought it was a massive steal for Houston when they traded for him. I was in middle school when that happened, and I still knew that was a home run trade for Houston as it went down. And I just could not believe the package that they got him for at the time. But I think that Harden returning to Houston, real possibility, and something that would really shake up the NBA in a big way. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you did enjoy this offseason preview. Don't forget to comment what team you want to see next. I'm sure there's a lot of Pistons fans out there saying, oh, do the Pistons next. And, Spurs fans, obviously, don't forget about us in Texas. I'm going to cover every team that I possibly can, but let me know which team I should cover next. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.